that occurs back in time. And there's a little bit of paranormal in there, but we get to actually see their relationship, how it developed, the people and some of the characters we met in book one. When Colin went back in the past, we get to meet some of these people, get to know them a little bit better. And so that will be coming November 4th. And following that, we actually have Stone of Hope, which is the fourth book in the series. And that will come sometime in 2025. I don't have a publication date yet. It's actually with my editor. I just recently signed the contract last week, and I'm very excited about that book. That features Brielle's brother, Dominic DeVolt, who is an Air Force Special Ops pilot. And we get to follow him on his story and how he finds love. And what's interesting is that actually starts in Florida. And it does not take place in Scotland.
Wow.
We actually follow Dominique back in time. He actually ends up going through a portal and finding himself in the middle of an Egyptian archaeological dig in the 1930s.
Now you have, I know a lot of this comes from your mind, but do you have to do a lot of research?
Oh, yes. Yes. I'm very well read. It's, as a writer, it's reading is part of writing. And reading is what started me wanting to write, reading stories and thinking, I would rather do this, or I would like this, or I don't like the way she wrote that. I'd write it like this. Yeah. So that's what started the juices of maybe, I want to be a writer. And it started when I was in my 30s, and I didn't start writing until my 50s, my mid 50s now. But that's what started it. And the interesting thing about all this research that I have to do is that it leads me great places. And like I mentioned before, a lot of the history drives a lot of my creativeness with the paranormal and how I insert and incorporate and make this paranormal and this history part of what these stories are. And that I've had some great discoveries from my research. I've for Stone of Lust, I stumbled across something that just really blew up my story. It really expanded my story for Stone of Lust. I don't want to share it because it's a spoiler, but there are gifts in research, and there are gifts in storytelling when you do your research, and I've allowed it to guide me, and it's really been a huge help.
Yeah, nothing more fun than research. So I love that. So, have you been to Scotland?
Yes, we went to Scotland a year ago. My husband and I went for our 30th wedding anniversary.
Wow, nice.
It was a dream trip for me. It was a bucket list item. Yeah. We'd taken over a year to plan it. We toured. We started in Glasgow. We went toured through Oban, went up into the Cairngorms, came back down, ended up in Edinburgh. A lot of inspiration from there. I visited Dunstafnage Castle. You can go to my website at margaretisardauthor.com. Check out some of the pictures I have there. We were in Oban for 2 days. Donnelly Castle is also a McDougall. The Dunstafnage Castle was originally built and owned by the McDougall family. Donnelly Castle, which is outside of Oban, is also featured. That's featured in Stone of Lust, and it was also a McDougall Castle. So it was very inspiring to visit these places that I've read so much about. I've looked at pictures, but being there and immersing myself in the aura and the atmosphere of what these places are and what they mean. Walking through the chapel in the woods, it's much larger than I imagined. It's a larger building than I thought, and it's very inspiring. And it was a really great trip, and we had a blast.
Yeah, you sound passionate about Scotland.
Uh-huh.
And now I have a million more questions. We're out of time. They're waving me off. I got to ask you a lot more things, Margaret. But I will say this to our viewers: the web address is on the screen. MargaretIsardAuthor.com. We have your Instagram up there. Any last thoughts? Anything else we've left out that you want our viewers to know?
No, just stay tuned. Keep in touch. Check out my website. Like I said, there's 7 books in this series. I've already drafted book 5 and book 6. I'm currently working on book 7. In addition to this, I hope to bring to you an additional series, The Dragons of Tantalon. We met our dragons, our shape-shifting dragons in the first book in a dream that Colin had. And I've also turned that into a 7-book series. Yeah. And so I hope to bring you that after the Stones of Iona series. So just stay in touch and keep in tune. There's so much more to come.
I'm going to wave off my producer for a second. I'll ask one more question. So this
Sure.
series, you call it the Stone series, or?
It's called the Stones of Iona series, and it features these stones that come from the Isle of Iona. these magic face stones, and they're put in the trust of the McDougal family to protect for all the realms.
And have you finished all 8? I know you're publishing one at a time, or do you have all 8 outlined? How does that work?
There's 7 books and 3 Christmas companion books. I'm drafting the 7th book. I finished book 1 through 6, and I have finished 2 of the Christmas books. So the first Christmas book will come out this year. It takes anywhere from 3 to 5 months to draft a book, to outline draft a book.
Yeah.
It gets now that I'm doing a series, it comes a lot easier and a lot quicker. But it's once they're drafted and complete, it still takes another 8 to 12 months from the time that I first get it to my editor, that it gets contracted, before it actually gets released. So you kind of, if I want these books to come out every 3 to 4 months, I kind of got to backstock them,
Yeah.
I got to keep working.
Well, you're an inspiration to all of us who are still working on our first, Margaret. I hope you come back every time a book's coming out, or as often as you like, because you're a great guest to have and an inspiration.
Well, thank you so much.
All righty. And for our viewers, stick around. We have another author coming up right after this. Welcome back to Briggs on Books, our international talk show where we meet authors from all over the world. I've got your next book for you if you're trying to figure out what to read next. Hazardous Lies is a work of fiction, or is it? A chemical plant explosion? I don't know. Could that really happen? Not only are we going to talk about the book, but guess what? I've got the author right here, too. Welcome to our guest, Stephen J. Wallace. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to speak with you.
By the way, here is the book cover. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, I'm a debut author. It's my first work of fiction. They say to write what you know. And so I have investigated several chemical accidents at refineries, chemical plants, laboratories, several things throughout my career. And I've always been interested not only in the technical side, but also in the creative writing side. So I've had this idea for some time. I've had a number of plot points that I had in my mind, and I would write those down over the last couple of years, and I then weaved it all into a story. But the way the book unfolds is there's an accident in a chemical plant, and it's a fatal accident. 3 employees die. And as the story unfolds, we have an investigator who himself is very compromised. He actually had a role, or seemed to have a role, that's part of the intrigue that rolls out, in a previous accident when he was working in the chemical industry. So he sort of, when he goes and investigates this, he sees this as an opportunity perhaps for him to get some type of redemption if he can find out what happened. And as he starts to figure out what may have caused the accident, he realizes that this particular hazard is designed into plants throughout the United States.
Huh.
And if he doesn't succeed in trying to figure out what happened, then there could be several more fatalities. And but the problem is, as you can imagine, there are some bad decisions that have been made, and there's a lot of pushback from the corporate level, an extreme amount of pushback. So he has to wade through all that, but also find the courage to continue, and it's a difficult task for him.
He gets a little political at some point?
Well, he's working for the government, so there's always that aspect to it as well. And one of the problems is that since he is in a brand new office, there is a very politically connected person who is a political appointee who wants to sweep the money for his own usage for the office. So it truly is very much a race against time, not only to find out what the problem was and to try to prevent it in other plants, but also because the very existence of this office itself and the investigation is on a very short timetable.
Now let's see, what did somebody say about you? You're an author trapped in the body of an engineer, or the other way around?
Yes. That's I sort of like to think of myself as a writer trapped in an engineer's body, or vice versa. As I said, I've written a number of technical papers, and I've also written some book chapters for safety handbooks. But I've also written some short stories and poems and even songs
Nice.
uh, as I've been young. So I've kind of had this interest in the technical side as an engineer, but I've also had a lot of interest in the creative side, and
Yeah.
so that creative side culminated with this, my first novel.
Now, Hazardous Lies is the name of the book. And who's going to read this? People who love thrillers, I guess.
People who love thrillers, people who like some of the people who have reviewed it said it sounds, and I take this as a great compliment. If you like David Baldacci type novels, they would those individuals would really like it. If you like intrigue, police procedurals, if you will, it is a it. And if you are interested in science, but not science so heavy that it's not approachable. One of the very important things to me, and it sounds contrived, but it's very true. When I set out to write this novel, I wanted to write a novel that a grandmother who perhaps didn't have a technical background could talk to her granddaughter who was a chemical engineer, and they could actually have a conversation about this. And I've actually heard from people that that's happened. I've had technical people who've talked to non-technical people, but they can all sort of calibrate about, oh, well, that's actually, I feel like I was inside a chemical plant.
Nice. Now, I'm putting up on the screen here a graphic you sent that says bestseller, now an Amazon bestseller. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I tell you why that's important. Why that's important to me is I'm always picking my next book. I'm always saying, what am I going to read next? And if I see bestseller or an award or some good reviews, or if I see an author being interviewed on a little talk show, it just helps me get to the next book, because there's just millions of books out there. I never know where to turn next. So hopefully the notice you got, it makes a big difference to me when picking my next book. So and congratulations, by the way. That's
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you very much. And I understand. I'm the same way. I love to read, but you have so many that can sort of fall on the slush pile. So it helps to know if the individual who wrote this particular book actually knows exactly what they're talking about. They can tell a realistic story, but not make it even though it's fiction, but not make it unrealistic. Hopefully that's what I've done.
And by the way, I introduced you, said it's a fiction, or is it a fiction? I mean, the kind of thing you describe in your book could actually happen. Is that right?
It could, yeah, very much so. As I said, I investigated several accidents in chemical plants when I was throughout my life. And it's very realistic scenarios. There are different type of accidents that are discussed, and all are very realistic, and perhaps they have happened. Again, it is a work of fiction. I want to say that. But it's not unrealistic. So it's fictional, but not unrealistic. It's very realistic.
Now, do you have another book churning around in your head?
I do. I've just finished a draft of one. It's a very different one. It's more of a humorous book, believe it or not, so it's a bit of a different genre. And whereas this one, some of the reviewers have said, is a bit like Chernobyl meets CSI, that would be a little bit more like The Office meets the federal government, and a bit of a humorous take on some things that can happen there. It's going to be a bit different, a bit of a novella, but I also have a few chapters already written for what may actually develop into a sequel of this one.
Nice. Oh, sequel to this one. That's nice. Yeah, it's amazing. I can tell you have an amazing mind, being an engineer, and I love it when an engineer could actually pull out of that, because sometimes engineers operate in a box, pull out of that and make something creative and entertaining, and I'll be even more interested to read your humorous work. So we'll unwrap your mind, Stephen J. Wallace's mind. By the way, I was trying to research the author before we talk, and went to Amazon, and your book popped right up. It was so easy to find. I just typed Stephen J. Wallace and popped up. It had a great little bio on you and a synopsis of the book, so that was great. Where else can people buy this?
They could go directly to my website, which is stephenjwallace.com, and Stephen is spelled with a PH. They can also go to Goodreads. I believe it is on Goodreads. It's on Amazon. Barnes and Noble has it as well. Target. So most anywhere that books
Yeah.
are sold,
Where
you
books
can
are sold,
you
yeah.
can get a copy.
By the way, I go to Goodreads. I post every book I read on Goodreads, so I encourage everybody to do that. It's kind of social media for nerds, people who read a lot of books, and I like to post a little review. And I just want to remind our audience, read this book and post a little review. That really helps, I think. Like I say, when I can see some reviews and some awards and stuff, it helps me pick the next book. And we do have your web address on the screen, stephenjwallace.com, so I encourage our viewers to go there. And whenever I'm reading, I research the author while I'm reading, so I'm glad you did that, have that space on there. Besides being able to order your book, what else might we find on your website?
I have written a few short stories, a bit of a diverse short stories. Uh, my interests go all the way from the macabre, more of sort of Edgar Allan Poe type of short stories. And I've also written a historical fiction biblical story as well about Samson. It's a fictional one, but so my interests are sort of all over the place. I think someone told me one time, another author who was quite successful said, "I just feel like I have all these ideas. I've got to put them down somewhere."
Put them down somewhere.
And I'm like, well, I'm not sure. I think perhaps I will write something that maybe no one will like everything I write, but at least there's enough variation that everyone will like something that I write.
Everybody will like something. I like that. Stephen, we're about out of time here, but let me put the cover up here again. Fabulous Lies. Any last thoughts for our viewers on the book or anything in the world you want to talk about?
No, I really appreciate you having me on today. Hazardous Lies, as I said, it's a thriller. I've been very honored with the reviews that I've received. An individual who actually worked for an organization I'm very familiar with, the U.S. Chemical Safety Board, was very kind enough to write his endorsement on the back cover, talking about how important it was and how realistic. And I think he's the one who mentioned that it's sort of like Chernobyl meets CSI. But again, I hope that if people like science and engineering and such, but they want to actually review it in an approachable story type way, this may very well be a good book for them to pick up, and I hope so. And as you said, please read it and leave a review either on Amazon or Goodreads or wherever you like to leave reviews, and I would greatly appreciate that.
And every once in a while, I like to say this: if you go out to Amazon or wherever you buy books and you go to order this book, don't just click once, click 5 times, get 5 copies and give them away. You're always having to go to somebody's house and you like to take a gift, and this book would be great, I think. Whenever I give a book, I go to their house in 5 years and the book's still there, so it's a great gift to give. So support the authors of this show. Thank you, Stephen, and I hope you'll come back on again and again.
I'd love to. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll be back with another author right after this. Welcome back to Briggs on Books, our international talk show where we talk to authors from all over the world. We talked to a Liverpudlian this morning, someone from Oregon, and now we're going to talk to a Californian about her book. It's a true story, by the way, My Real Mother. I'm already getting a little tear-jerker over a little bit. I hope it's not too sad. But welcome our guest, Tina Kadame. Welcome, Tina.
Hi, thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me here.
Now, you've been a storyteller your whole life, is that right?
I fashioned myself a storyteller, yes. Yes. Well, I like to say that when you ask me a question, you do not get a yes or no answer. You get a story.
Good. Now, and you finally put one down on paper and got it published. Both are tremendous accomplishments. Tell us about the book. Here's the cover, by the way. My Real Mother. Tell us a little bit about this book.
So this book is a memoir of such, told by me as I walk the journey with my mother through the events that led up to her abandoning me and my sister when we were very young.
And how old were you?
I was 5 and my sister was 13 months old.
And you went to live with an aunt?
We did. We went and lived with our aunt and uncle eventually. Yes.
Yeah.
And when I was starting to write this book, I realized that I thought I was going to write my memoir, but then I thought, you know what? I know what happened to me. I was missing those 5 years of my life, and I really wanted to know what happened to my mother. And so that's where it started. I went all the way back to when my parents met, and this book it spans the 10 years that lead up to her leaving.
And by the way, this is the first book of how many in this series?
This is the first one of three.
First of three, okay.
Yes.
And you have them
Yes.
all figured out what's going to be in each book, or have you kind of
I kind
penciled
of get
out?
it as I go, but book number 1 is my real mother. Book number 2, my other mother, which will delve more into my aunt and the saint, as I call her, that stepped in to my mother's place when she was gone. And then the third book is called The Good Girl, and you'll get more of my voice there as I navigate my life with two mothers.
Yeah. When I was researching this interview and researching this book, it struck me that there you're living with, like you just said, a saint, someone who gave you unconditional love. But what I caught is that unconditional love for your real mother, that doesn't go away.